Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I will call the February 15th, 2022 meeting of the Yucca Valley Town Council to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Council members Abel.
Yes, here.
Dennison.
Here.
Droz.
Here.
Lombardo.
Here.
And Mayor Schooler.
Here. And if you'll please rise and join us, Mayor Abel, Councilmember Abel will lead us in the pledge to our flag.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we will be starting off with a couple of presentations, introductions.
We have a new again employee
Sorry, didn't know which one we're doing first. Mayor and Council, come on up, Zahra. It is my pleasure to introduce a new employee to the Community Services Department. Zahra Sharf joined the town last December as our new recreation leader at the Yucca Valley Senior Center. She joins our existing staffer, Nina McCullough, in presenting our expanded senior programming funded by Measure Y. Zahara brings her many talents to the position at the Senior Center. Her administrative skills were honed during a decade of corporate management while serving as head of procurement for the administration department of AmBank Malaysia. She then married and moved to the US. She enjoys volunteering as an ESL tutor, and she's also an avid table tennis player in our town program. Her bubbly and outgoing personality is a welcome addition to the department. She's already contributed to creating a more welcoming and vibrant atmosphere at the Senior Center. So please welcome Zahra Sharf to our town team. Zahra.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I've been here since December, and it has been an honor to serve the town of Yucca Valley, and I am so grateful and blessed for the opportunity given. I enjoyed myself so much at the Senior Center. I didn't know how exciting it would be to be working at the Senior Center, but they all have been amazing. And I've adopted all of them as my grandpas and my grandmas. I look forward to coming to work and spending time with them and helping them and ensuring that all their needs are met. And recently on Monday, which was Valentine's, we had a 90-pack people at the Senior Center celebrating the Valentine's lunch and dance. And generally, that's what they like to do, dance and music. We had photo booths, we had ice cream stands, we had all sorts of stuff for them to enjoy, and it was a privilege to see that each and every one of them had enjoyed themselves and wanting more of such festive and, kind of events. So we hope when the Senior Center opens in hopefully end of April, Nina and I will be able to come up with more plans, more activities for them to enjoy. And once again, thank you for having me in the crew.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Mr. Shigley, if you want to join me up front, please.
Hey, Rick, there's still time to change your mind.
So I think as the council is aware, we've talked about some pending retirements of long-term employees, people that have been here for 20 years, other time periods, and that's going to start in March, and then we have another one in July. What we didn't anticipate having to do was saying thank you to someone who's been here for 10 years, still has a lot of years left to work, but they have decided to relocate out of California. This evening, we're saying thank you to Rick Shigley. Rick has been with us for 10 years and 2 more days, I believe, if I've read the calendar correctly. Rick started out as a temporary part-time facility maintenance worker with the town. He then became an emergency assignment at our animal shelter. He then promoted to street maintenance worker 1, was promoted to street maintenance worker 2. Rick is our premier grader operator. I don't know if any of you have ever had the pleasure of trying to operate a grader and do a good job of operating the grader. It takes a skill, and Rick is very good at that. He's actually been hired by a government agency in South Dakota as a grader operator. So we are going to miss him immensely. We wish him the best of luck. We're here to say thank you for your 10 years of service to the community, and we wish you and your family the best as you move forward.
I just wanted to tell everyone thank you for the opportunity to work here. I definitely learned a lot. Robert, my supervisor, definitely learned the most from him. Going to be taking a lot of knowledge with me from him and from the other guys on the crew. And definitely wanted to say thank you to my wife for putting up with me while I do all this and for going with me out there. And very excited to go, but sad to leave at the same time. So, thank you.
I imagine that's a lot of snow removal in South Dakota with that grader. Well, good luck to you, Rick. Okay, we'll move along to the approval of the agenda. May I have a motion?
Mayor Schooler, I'd like to approve tonight's agenda.
Mayor, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Councilmembers Abel,
Yes.
Dennison,
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
and Mayor Schooler.
Yes. And the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are routine matters or formal documents covering previous town council instruction. Items are enacted by one motion and a second without separate discussion unless a member of the town council or town staff requests dialogue on a specific item at the beginning of the meeting. Requests for public comment on the consent agenda items should be filed with the town clerk. Does anybody in the public want to comment on the consent agenda? Any items on the consent agenda? And any members of the council, staff?
No, Mayor, if there's no comments or pulling of an item, I would like to recommend that we approve tonight's consent agenda items 3 through 14.
Mayor, I'll second that, items in the consent agenda.
We have a motion and a second.
Councilmembers Abel,
Yes.
Dennison,
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
and Mayor Schooler.
Yes. Moving along to department reports. Item number 15, notice of intent to comply with SB 1383 regulations. Can we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This evening, before you, I have the notice of intent to comply with SB 1383 regulations. The recommendation before you is that the Town Council adopt a resolution as required by Cal Recycle approving the submittal of the notice of intent to comply with SB 1383 regulations and authorize staff to submit the notice of intent to comply and the adopted resolution through electronic submission via email to Cal Recycle. So a little bit of background about what SB 1383 is. It's legislation from the state of California that went into effect on January 1st, 2022, and requires every city to implement organic waste collection services for all residents and businesses. The law was signed by Governor Jerry Brown in 2016 and aims to address climate change by reducing the state's methane emissions that come from landfills. SB 1383 sets statewide targets to reduce landfill disposal of organic materials compared to a 2014 baseline data. They would like a reduction of organic materials of 50% by the year 2020 and 75% by the reduction, or excuse me, 75% reduction by the year 2025, and it also includes an element to recover 20% of currently disposed edible food for human consumption by the year 2025. The law grants regulatory authority to the California Department of Recycling, Resources, and Recovery, also known as CalRecycle, and they developed SB 1383 regulations. These regulations, as you will recall, were supposed to have been approved in early 2019, and they were not approved until November 3rd of 2020. The waste reduction goals of SB 1383 are established and imposed on the town residents and businesses through California state law, and they are not optional to the town. The regulations require cities to establish legal authority to implement and mandate programs by adopting enforceable mechanisms by January 1st, 2022. Hardships in complying with SB 1383 are a result from COVID-19. The pandemic has not allowed the town to complete all of the required actions of SB 1383 by the January 1st deadline. Things like supply chain issues, which are delaying the construction of the composting facility where the town's organics will be taken, have caused delays. In addition, CalRecycle's late adoption of the final regulations have also caused delays. Those were delayed by over a year. And the cause of this has made an impact, or will be making an impact, on the town's economy as a whole. The reason is that the new state-mandated organics collection programs will raise trash rates for businesses and residents. And partially, that will be due to the fact that we have to create an additional third route that is needed for organics collection. In addition, we have to purchase new leak-proof trucks that are needed to haul the organics. We also need to provide new containers for organics that have specific color and labeling requirements as mandated by the legislation. Jurisdictions are also mandated to monitor and perform route audits and ensure compliance by everybody. The jurisdictions are also required to establish edible food recovery programs and monitor compliance with those programs as well. And all of this, the cities are also required to keep up with all of the state's required reporting and record keeping for all of these different things. So the town sympathizes with businesses because they were really hit hard due to mandatory closures, limited operating procedures, staffing issues. So we know that these increased costs are going to become a burden for residents and businesses alike. So the town is going to be submitting a notice of intent. And the notice of intent is part of SB 619, which was signed into law in October of 2021 by Governor Newsom. It provides relief for the local jurisdictions that are struggling to implement SB 1383 for a variety of reasons. The notice of intent must be submitted by March 1st, 2022, and if approved, the town will be eligible for administrative civil penalty relief for the 2022 calendar year. Some of the other cities and counties that are submitting notices of intent are the County of San Bernardino, for the entire San Bernardino County jurisdiction, including the areas to the east of us, Joshua Tree, to the west of us, Morongo Valley, and to the north of us, the unincorporated areas. City of Victorville is also going to be submitting their notice of intent, and also the city of Big Bear Lake. And I know that there are others, but these are the ones I know for sure. So I know this is really small, but this is a snapshot of the attachment that was attached to the staff report with the town's notice of intent information on it. It provides some of the legislative mandated actions that are going to be required, and then the town's proposed schedule for implementation. As you can see, a majority of those things are we're putting out to be implemented around July 1st of 2023. So this year, we're working hard, and we have been working hard up until this point as well, but we're going to be working hard with making sure that all of the final infrastructure is in place so that the town can actually put the organics collection services into effect and have the programs in place that will ensure proper compliance. So the town's efforts, like I had stated, for making sure that we are in compliance with SB 1383 are focused on working with Burtech to put the necessary infrastructure in place for the organics collection. We need to be developing the edible food recovery program and the compliance requirements associated with those, establishing recovered organic waste and recycled product procurement policies and different things like that, making sure that we are compliant for 1383 according to what our plan is that we're submitting. In addition, since the town adopted their solid waste ordinance and franchise agreement prior to the final CalRecycle adoption of the 1383 regulations, staff will be also thoroughly reviewing these documents to ensure that they are in full compliance. And we may bring these recommended revisions to these documents to the council later this year. So again, the recommendation is to adopt a resolution as required by CalRecycle approving the submittal of the notice of intent to comply with SB 1383 regulations and authorize staff to submit the notice of intent to comply and the adopted resolution through electronic submission via email to CalRecycle. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions following public comment.
Thank you. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this item? Any member of the public online, joining us online? Nobody? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Any member of the council have some comments on this one?
Well,
I would like to say something.
oh, go ahead. We'll let you speak.
Sorry, I guess we're out of sync because I'm online. But anyway, I just want to thank Jessica for all her hard work. I am on the JPA board, and I see all the hard work she does. So thank you, Jessica. And this extra time, we really need it. So we appreciate your work.
Thank you.
I wanted to comment that I'm not real excited about this. I think it's going to be an expensive ordeal and create a lot of new and unnecessary problems. It's something that's kind of forced on us from the state of California, and we really don't have a choice. But I think it's going to greatly impact the fees and costs to our constituents in our town. You can see we have to add a third route, which is about a third of what our bill is going to be. So it's got our cost of trash collection probably expected to go up about a third. Because we have two routes now, we're going to need a third. Also, just the handling of the materials and trying to make use of the edible human or humanly edible food that is being wasted. It has some good implications, but it's going to be very difficult to handle it in an efficient manner to make it cost efficient. I think it's a good thing that we'll have food for programs that can distribute it, hopefully, and make use of it before it is expired. But I think it's going to be costly to do so, and we'll need the help of all sorts of nonprofits and other things, volunteers and things, to make that happen. We have really no choice other than to approve this, and so I move we move forward with this and get it done.
Councilmember Abel?
Yes, I had a couple questions. One was establish the edible food recovery program and monitor compliance. What are we going to have to, that's something the town's responsible in doing?
Yes. We are responsible for establishing the edible food programs according to the CalRecycle regulations for 1383. What that entails is groups are divvied up into two different tiers. There's tier 1 and there's tier 2. Tier 1 is our businesses that are like the grocery stores and supermarkets that are greater than 10,000 square feet. They would be required right now to comply with this, whether they are backhauling. They have to prove to us that they are definitely taking their edible food and doing something with it so that it's getting somewhere so that it can be consumed by those who are less fortunate. The Tier 2 group is a little bit smaller. It's going to include restaurants. It's going to include healthcare facilities. It's going to include places like gyms or hotels if they serve food. So those requirements come into play in 2024 for Tier 2. Right now, Tier 1 is responsible, and most of them are already backhauling, so we are compliant with that. But the Tier 2 is where it's going to get tricky. And we, as the town, the state has mandated that the town has to make sure that these generators have contracts with local food banks for them to take their food. And then we have to keep track of how much food that they are gathering from them and where the food is going. So there's a ton of record keeping that's required, way more than we've ever had to do in the past.
Well,
Yeah, and there's no funding for any of this.
Yeah,
So
that was my
it's-
other question. The state hasn't given us any additional funding to handle the responsibilities.
No, there has been the Cal Recycle grant that just recently came out. It's based on population. The town is going to be able to be eligible for $30,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's really not. Not when you're trying to put together these brand-new programs that you've never had in place before. So a lot of that's going to probably go out to the marketing and outreach that we need to put together to inform everybody of all of this stuff that's going to be coming out.
Well, it's unfortunate as far as the cost going up for the consumers, for us as individuals and so forth, but the thought of reducing landfill waste is a wonderful thing, and it's going to be wonderful to see innovations and things that come along to help deal with this waste, and hopefully, like you said, more and more people will get fed, which is a wonderful thing as well. And I really appreciate the governor allowing this notice of intent option, because it was really impossible for communities to be able to meet the guidelines and then end up getting fined. So I appreciate and applaud the governor for doing that. Have we done anything is there anything we can do to help keep the cost down for our local residents as much as possible? Is there anything we're doing or negotiating with Burtec?
We're working with Burtec to make sure that our rates are reasonable, and we're really working hard to do that. So anything that we can do, and I know Burtec, also doesn't want to, they don't want to gouge everybody either. So we're working really hard with seeing what we can do to make sure that the rates are not such a shock to people, but they need to know that they are going to be increased from what they are today.
And with the mandatory trash pickup, which, is helping reduce people using the dumpsters and other small businesses or people illegally dumping and so forth, more people complying with that and being able to have trash service, hopefully those costs will not be a third. Hopefully it'll be less. So I'm looking forward to see what we can do. And I do also support this moving forward with this adopt this resolution to allow us to go forward with this notice of intent.
Mayor Pro Tem? Good?
Yeah, I just want to say that, our Burtec in the area, they provide this trash service for us, and they do a good job. They've really helped supply a consistent service to our community. It's been a long road getting there, but I think our trash is mitigated very well. It's transported very well. The recycling system, that's up to the community. We've been doing some sampling, and the community's chipping in and doing that too. I'm not too concerned about the logistics of moving our waste or perceived waste from one location to another. I think that's the easiest part of the program. The hardest part is all the secondary programs that are dependent on some of the items that were mentioned in the presentation. So that's the part that I'm really concerned about, because that's the unknown for us. It's never been done before. It's a new part of it. But as far as collection goes, that is a system that's in place today. It works well today, and we will be able to handle the organics and getting rid of it from the residential areas, our homes, as long as we continue to do waste, taking our waste and putting it in the proper collection bins and then just moving it out. It's the other parts that are really difficult for us as a community to mitigate, because as the oversight agency for that, as Jessica had said in the presentation, there's so many smaller businesses that do produce organic waste, and that's the part that I'm really interested to see how that works out with the community. Because it's important that we have to comply with this due to the direction from the state. And I think the grace period is very good for us right now because it is needed. There's been a lot of delays in the last 2 years for the program.
Okay, thank you. With that, I would entertain a motion to
I'll move the item.
approve. We have a motion, second?
I'll second, whoops, I'll second that item.
Councilmember Abel seconds. We have a vote?
Councilmembers Abel,
Yes.
Dennison,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
and Mayor Schooler.
Yes. All right, we move to item number 16, Environmental Assessment Development Code Amendment regarding short-term vacation rental regulations. May we have a staff report, please?
Mayor, I'll have to recuse myself from this item, and thank you very much. Everyone have a good evening.
Good night.
I will also have to recuse myself, so thank you very much.
Mayor and Council, this is an ordinance of the Town of Yucca Valley, Town Council of the Town of Yucca Valley, California, repealing Chapter 9.54 of the Municipal Code and adding Chapter 5.40 to the Municipal Code and amending Sections 9.07.040 and 9.66.010 of the Municipal Code. Recommendation before the council this evening from your Planning Commission is that the Town Council finds the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15061B3, which states that if an activity is covered by the general rule that CEQA applies only to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment, and where it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that the activity in question may have a significant effect on the environment, the activity is not subject to CEQA. And number two, that the Town Council introduces the ordinance, Chapter 5.40 of the Yucca Valley Municipal Code. As the council is aware, short-term vacation rental regulations have been in place in Yucca Valley since December 1st of 2017. So there are existing regulations on the books. The town has been taking in applications and processing applications since that time. And before the council are some amendments, some recommended amendments to those existing regulations. The staff presentation is going to focus on the highlights of those recommended changes. So we're not going to get down in our presentation to the details of each and every word, but we're going to hit on the major components of the recommended actions. First, the commission discussed the appropriate placement of these regulations, be that in the development code, which is also known as the zoning code, or in the other portions of the municipal code. And the commission kicked that around and identified both positive aspects of the location in either portion. As drafted and bringing this before you, the code would move out of the zoning regulations and be placed into what we refer to as the remainder of the municipal code. The Planning Commission made some modifications to several definitions. These included directors' meetings, guest, occupant, revocation hearing, and town manager, and those have all been added to the sections for definitions. One of the areas that received much focus, both leading into the hearing process and during the hearing process and public testimony process, had to do with the number of occupants allowed at these short-term vacation rentals. And the language that's on the screen identifies the standards from the Planning Commission's recommendation. So for 3 or more bedrooms, a maximum of 8 overnight occupants, and 3 vehicles with 12 occupants during the day, compared to the current regulations, which allow for 14 overnight occupants. So again, reducing from that 14 maximum down to 8, also making some minor modifications to those during the daytime and the number of vehicles on the site. Since the Planning Commission's recommendation, staff held some internal conversations and received some input from the community about What about in those unique cases where somebody would like to have more than 8 overnight guests? Is there a way to create a process for review of those applications and consideration of those applications? So language has been added since the Planning Commission hearing. We wanted to identify that specifically. And I'll just use this screen up here. It says, for short-term vacation rental units with 4 or more bedrooms, owners or the owner's authorized representative or agent may apply for a land use compliance review in accordance with Chapter 9.66, authorizing an increase in the total number of occupants, vehicles, and guests permitted in the short-term vacation rental unit. A land use compliance review application for short-term vacation rental units shall be prepared and made available by the director. In the code, the director has the authority to forward any application to the Planning Commission. So if we do receive an application for more than 8 guests, and it may be in a neighborhood where there may be concerns expressed by the residents, the director can forward that on to the Planning Commission for consideration. Noise. Noise is probably one of the key elements which raise neighbors' concerns about the operation of short-term vacation rentals. This language states that the owner or owner's authorized agent shall install noise-aware hardware or software or its equivalent or better prior to operations. The town does not have access to this hardware or software. The town does not have access to the data. The owner or the operator is in complete control of that data. And what that provides, is staff would describe it as an insurance policy, that if a complaint is filed, the owner or operator has the data that's collected off of that system to indicate compliance or non-compliance with noise standards. In the past 60 days, as we have been interviewing before issuing a permit, we've been interviewing the owners and operators of STVRs. Easily in excess of 75% of the operators are already using this type of device in addition to video equipment on the exterior of the structures. Many of them already see the benefits, and staff believes the town will benefit by being able to address complaints in a fair and equitable manner with the use of that data when necessary. Maximum number of permits. Recommendation before the council is that the town establish a maximum number of permits. And this would be set at 10% of the town's official inventory of single-family residential dwelling units and duplex dwelling units combined. In January of each calendar year, the Planning Commission would be presented with what that number would be, and the Planning Commission would establish that as the official 10% number. There were different percentages discussed back and forth between the members of the Planning Commission during that public hearing, from 6% to 10% and in between. So is there a magic science to that number? Probably not. But this is the number that the Planning Commission landed on as they forwarded that recommendation to the Town Council. Density standards. I think another issue that the Council and Planning Commission heard expressed from different neighborhoods in the community was they desired not to see house after house after house after house abutting each other, being able to be short-term vacation rentals. Whether those problems were perceived or real problems, that was definitely a concern that was expressed. And the recommendation that has come forward is that there shall be no short-term vacation rental permit issued within 300 feet of an existing short-term vacation rental property. Owner-occupied STVRs. Owner-occupied, as staff took the recommendation forward to the Planning Commission, was identified as 330 out of 365 days a year, so that they're a majority of the time. And the theory being that with the owner on site, they're in complete control, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those issues, the type of issues that may occur would be minimal at best. Planning Commission discussed that, kicked it around, and came back with reducing that standard down to 183 days per year. From staff's perspective, the residency and the amount of time during the year, 6 months, 180 days versus almost 365 days a year. At 180 days, from our perspective, it's not really owner-occupied. They're not there to address the concerns. So we just wanted to bring that issue to the council's attention. Again, is there a perfect number and a magic number scientifically that's going to prevent problems from occurring? No, but the theory was to be there a majority of the year. Then finally, the final section we wanted to highlight were the fines that give the town the ability to address problem properties through financial disincentives, if necessary. So that is a highlight of the major changes that have been recommended to the town council by the Planning Commission. Again, the recommendation, as stated at the start of the meeting, remains the same, and staff would be happy to answer questions following public comment.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have cards for people that would like to speak?
I have one request to speak so far from Andrew Fortner.
If anyone would like to speak, you can come up to the front and fill out a card to speak. When you come up, you have 3 minutes. There will be a light and a noise that happens at the 3-minute mark, so we ask you to conclude your comments at that point. When you come up, if you would state your name and community of residence before beginning.
Sure. My name is Andrew Fortner, and I live in the town of Joshua Tree. I am the Director of Operations at Homestead Modern, the largest short-term vacation rental manager based in the town of Yucca Valley. I have reviewed the proposed changes to the short-term rental vacation ordinance, and although we generally support stricter regulation of short-term vacation rentals, I again wish to point out that some of the proposed changes are based on unrealistic expectations or appear to be contrary to the existing town policies. One thing that I didn't see in particular, but I do want to reiterate, are the response times, which I believe was a proposed measure that a 15-minute call or 15-minute call or text response time supposes that all short-term vacation rental managers have a team of operators standing by 24/7, which is obviously not the case. While establishing a strict response time rule without judgment calls may make sense in the abstract, you're asking a short-term vacation rental manager to never go to a movie, to never take their phone to always take their phone into the shower, and answer the phone in church and other places where it's not appropriate. The newest version of this regulation now states that only one person may be the responding party for any time frame, which means that that person may never go on vacation as well. This reads like a tough statement designed for public consumption that the town has no intent on enforcing because it has made no attempt to consider the practical implications of the rule. The 30-minute physical response time has its own set of problems. As a professional manager, we likely adhere to the best practices of any manager in town, and that involves a complaint escalation process. We analyze whether the complaint is likely valid, and then we reach out to the guest, then determine if a physical intervention is necessary and safe, and only then send a person out to the short-term vacation rental. A real example of that process, we once received a noise complaint about a house that we manage, and we called the guests and confirmed that the noise complaint was actually not them, but rather a house nearby. The complainant again called and said he was going to go there himself with a gun. We called the sheriff's department, and in no circumstance would have felt comfortable sending an employee to that home. Yet, under these new rules and regulations, we would have been in violation of your proposed ordinance. Finally, responsiveness should be tied to legitimate complaints. Substantially all of the complaints we have received in the last several years have been about issues that are not prohibited by the relevant ordinances. This includes things such as legal fire pits, and generally just are complaints made by neighbors who do not like short-term vacation rentals and can call to complain about non-issues. Establishing a standard that is against best practices and often impossible to meet would be counterproductive, as it would be violated constantly. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Clint Stoker. followed by Madeline Lavoie.
Good evening. Clint Stoker, live here in Yucca Valley. There's a couple things that just still struck out at me. The first being the 10% of either the total number of units or 10% of the dwelling units that are single family and duplexes. As our town grows, we are likely going to see more multifamily residential, large scale, and having a lot more dwelling units. I think that it's a mistake now to not consider all of the dwelling units as the total in figuring our cap if we're going to implement that. And that was a unanimous thing with the planning commissioners that were still on the dais during the planning commission meeting. Again, the 300-foot rule, while a couple of the planning commissioners out of 3 thought that would be something appropriate, it was not something that was unanimous. It's something that personally, not being a planning commissioner during that time, that I think is just a mistake. It really does limit someone's ability to use their property as they see fit. The owner's thing, it was unanimous as far as 180 days being more than half the year if it was owner occupied, that it would be considered an owner occupied unit from those 3 commissioners. The last item really wasn't something that was brought up, but I still think it's very important. Currently, and in our current ordinance and the proposed ordinance, we're listing single-family residences as our criteria for a cap. However, there are many single-family residences that are legitimate SFRs or that are currently in zoning that would not be allowed. There's only a few of those in town that kind of are single-family residences that exist in kind of industrial zones going back decades and decades. And in my opinion, that's something that needs to change. We need to really think of it, if we're going to attach a cap to the total number of units, then we need to attach a cap and allow all of those to be able to be an STR if they see fit. And we're really only talking about maybe 20 houses in town that are kind of single-family residences that don't exist in a single-family residential zone. And I think that's it for me. I really do appreciate all the time that's gone into this. It seems like we've put a lot of work in, and for everyone, all of us in residents, we really want something that's going to work. I really appreciate the noise monitoring software, as I feel that it's always been a good thing for me to have cameras and noise monitoring at the places that we have. And it allows me to really make sure that our units aren't something that's a detraction to other residents' ability to love their homes as well. So thank you so much.
Madeline Lavoie, and then next will be Ryan Sherlin.
Hello, everyone. I really appreciate everything you've done. There's a lot of work. And I think almost everything you've done is 100% I'm good with. The one item on your list is the density law, the 300-foot rule. You have 2 houses side by side that are both 2.5 acres. One of them can't be an Airbnb. That's ridiculous. So I think that the density rules are all really well thought out, except for the 300-foot rule, which I completely and totally disagree with, and I'm just stating that for the record. And good luck with everything else. Thank you.
Ryan Sherlin, and then Brian Schroeder will be following.
Hi, everyone. Ryan Sherlin, resident in the area for nearly 2 years now, and I own an Airbnb both here in Yucca and in Joshua Tree. I also just want to say thank you. Clearly, a lot of really good thought has gone into the regulations. They are definitely needed. And I think, for me, there are 3 things that I would point out and just want to offer for consideration. Similarly to the last guest who spoke, the density issue. I own a property, it's a 2-bedroom on 10 acres. And if you were to measure 300 feet from the house itself, I think we'd be open up a lot more opportunity than if you measure it from the lines of my property. So just something to keep in consideration for properties that are on acreage, the, I guess, incentive system that creates. The second thing was around the compliance review to increase occupancy and vehicles. Similarly, I'm a 2-bedroom house on 10 acres, and oftentimes I've got guests that are coming in from 4 different places in 4 different cars. So again, just for consideration, maybe homes below the 4 bedrooms could also apply for a consideration for increased, at least vehicles, knowing that folks are oftentimes coming in from different locations. The third thing is around the fines. I've worked in public policy for 15 years, and the one thing that I found is really important to think about is the system of incentives that policies set up. I'm absolutely fine and think that owners of Airbnbs and short-term rentals should be held accountable, but it's oftentimes even those who are in full compliance with everything that is required of them can't control the guests and what they do in the property. So I would ask you all to consider what it would take to think about a fine structure for those who are actually committing the violations. Because if I'm a guest and I know that I'm going to be fined, I'm surely going to be much more incentivized not to break the rules than a homeowner who is doing everything they can, but really has absolutely no control over what guests do in their property. So I would also ask that you just reconsider how the incentive structure is set up for those to be penalized if they commit infractions. Thank you.
Brian Schroeder?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present myself here to you all. My name is Brian Schroeder. I am here on behalf of a property regarding APN number 0601-1121, and the physical address is 7054 Dryden Avenue. In the past, we have attempted to use this or attempted to use it as an Airbnb, which we have been denied. The house might be familiar as it's the only one in the middle of town that sticks out like a sore thumb with the odd angled roof and indoor pool directly located between the town center mall and Jeep/Dodge dealership. We've been trying to pull a short-term vacation rental permit on the property in the past, providing all necessary documentation and fees. Our packet has been denied as the property is zoned as commercial mixed use. We previously sent in appeal application with all fees and additional documentation and received a denial letter shortly after. After the dwelling sat on the market for over a year vacant, we purchased the property in October of 2017 with the understanding that there would be no issues to be able to rent the property as a short-term vacation rental. Under the short-term vacation rental ordinance, the home shall be a single-family resident unit or duplex unit constructed and permitted for residential dwelling purposes. The property 7054 Dryden Avenue is a single-family residential dwelling that was built in 1979. Before the commercial buildings were developed on both sides of the property. The house sits alone in the heart of Yucca Valley, and visitors have great options for local shopping, restaurants, etc. Renters have ample parking, no neighbors to be of nuisance, easy access, and a prime location. My wife and I both grew up in the town and have recently spoken to many Yucca Valley residences to agree that all of the houses, of all of the houses, that one should be denied as an Airbnb. Since the house is a single-family residence dwelling with no plans of turning it into commercial use facility, I understand it is under commercial mixed use, as an apartment complex, etc., a short-term vacation rental is an ideal option. Since residential use falls under commercial mixed use zoning, and this property is residential, it should be considered as a short-term vacation rental option. Thank you tremendously for your time. We hope you consider our request, and we'll continue to prove why we should be able to use this as a short-term vacation rental. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
We have 5 people online requesting public comment. We're going to start with Monica Zimrick, followed by Lisa Edwards. Monica Zimrick, I have requested you to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Monica Zimrick. I'm with Building Joshua Tree Real Estate, and I do want to thank Shane and everyone who has worked so hard on this. You know, this was really needed to, make better rules and regulations, and it's greatly appreciated. There's just a couple items that I think we need to address and think about. One of them is regarding the change of ownership. If a person buys a permitted Airbnb STVR, I think they should be able to continue to rent it for 4 months, 3 or 4 months under the past permit while they go through the application process. The reason being is that a lot of times these vacation rentals are sold fully furnished and ready to go. And it gives them the opportunity to have a seamless transfer and to begin renting it immediately. And since the application process and approval process seems to be taking a little longer these days, I would suggest that we allow those fully permitted STVRs to be rented by the new owner during the application process. My second issue is, of course, with the 300-foot rule. There's a lot of issues with this, and I would encourage everyone to reflect on the potential ramifications of this rule. I believe that there very well might be a number of lawsuits against the town by current owners and future owners. It would create chaos in the market with home prices, with appraisals, and general desirabilities of one home over the other. It would also create issues with both agents and sellers. For instance, if an application is in process and a current homeowner slash seller and their agent is unaware of it, and a home nearby is purchased for use as a vacation rental, it could be a disclosure issue, and there would be a lot of people involved in lawsuits. And also what Madeline and another gentleman referred to regarding acreage properties. There are a lot of properties or a lot of homes that are on large acreages, and to have a 300-foot rule when they're technically probably 600, 800 feet from another residence just doesn't seem like a good idea. So anyway, those are my 2 things that I think that you should kind of reflect on, see if we can fine tune them. But again, I thank you for your time on doing all this and all of the effort that have been put into it. Thank you.
Next, we have Lisa Edwards, followed by Margaret Strachan. Lisa Edwards, I have requested you to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me? Because I'm having a hard time unmuting.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Lisa Edwards. I live in Yucca Valley, and I've lived in this town for about 50 years. I have to agree too also with what's been said about the 300-foot rule, because I think maybe it should be more from 300 feet from the actual building structure to the next structure, because in reality, we live on acreage and we have a little guest house in the back that we recently got approved. And when I had to send out my letters, and such when you have a regular property, that area is actually pretty huge. And so I don't know. That just like when everyone has said, I think it should be maybe reviewed a little bit. Also about the noise aware hardware, I could really understand if you've got like a full single-family house and you're not living in the area and it's not being owner-occupied, I could understand that. But like in my case, I have a little casita in the back. We only have couples. I mean, we're always on the property. It's not an issue. And so I don't know. I think maybe it should be reconsidered. I don't really know the cost or what's involved with that kind of hardware, but I don't think it's necessary in every case. So perhaps there could be an exclusion depending on your circumstance, such as ourselves. Also about the outdoor lighting. I mean, nobody really wants to live next door to a property that's lit up like a Christmas tree, but in some ways, I don't like how it's biased towards just vacation rentals. I mean, like you could have a neighbor that doesn't have a vacation rental that's got lights on constantly all the time that, is affecting your nice viewing of the stars, at night. So I don't know. I guess I don't like to, I think there's certain things that should just be for everybody, not just only for vacation rentals. And especially like noise. I mean, you can have a neighbor that's not a vacation rental that's got a pool and always having big parties and having fireworks go off. So it's not always just the vacation rentals. It can just be permanent residents too. So something to be aware of. And also with the fees, the fines, nobody goes into this to want to have problems or anything like that. And, sometimes we're starting off new. And I know that there are people that are really against the vacation rentals and they could complain for really no reason. And so I think $1,500 for your first offense is really excessive, perhaps. And I like what the gentleman said about maybe hearing it more towards, the actual guests that are not following the rules. But I can see it being stepped up, like you have for second and third offenses, but it just seems really steep. We're not all corporations, we're not all big entities that have just tons of money. And yeah, we're trying to make a little extra money. It doesn't mean, just have an excessive amount. I just think it's really steep. And I think most of us are trying to, have a good business, trying to respect our neighbors and trying to, make it all work out. So just something to consider. That's all. Thank you. And appreciate all the hard work. And, we all want to make this work and we all want to get along with our neighbors and, respect one another. So I'm glad that we're working on this together. Anyway, I think the comments were really good that were said. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any?
Next, we have Margaret Strachan, followed by Paul Ivanuska. Margaret Strachan, I have requested you to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Margaret Strachan. I'm a homeowner and permanent full-time resident of the town of Yucca Valley. I submitted written comments but wanted to speak as well. A huge issue for this town is housing. Housing that is unavailable for long-term occupancy means that families lose homes and have to move many out of the area. This disrupts employment, may cause a long commute or job loss with ensuing effects on family, and critically affect children's education. As a veteran public school teacher, I can tell you that young people are greatly affected by changing schools socially and academically. They lose friendships, ties to the community, and can have gaps in their education. Family homes are being snatched up by corporate entities, with 2 new corporate-owned short-term rentals just offered within a block of my home in a wonderful family neighborhood. While I support the revisions to the short-term rental ordinance, and particularly applaud the 300-foot distance rule and 1 short-term rental per parcel, no matter the acreage, and I do live on acreage, I believe the ordinance is still quite weak in comparison to some nearby communities. Discussed at planning meetings were the following, yet no mention in the revised ordinance. 2-night stay requirement, inspection requirements for renewal, safety, and meeting ADA requirements, legal access to short-term rental via road or easement, trespassing is not addressed, day guests staying to 9 p.m., not 10 p.m., in-person check-in, and signage on the property designating it as a short-term rental with occupancy limits listed, as well as owner contact info. It is important to remember that a short-term rental is a 24/7 business. An owner or representative must be available just as a hotel, motel, or campground must have staff available to respond promptly, and staffing has to be factored into the business operations. One person commented at the December 7th, 2021 Town Council meeting that was inconvenient to meet guests at check-in because they had to pick kids up from school. We'll hire an employee. Remote check-ins turn residential areas into transient districts where guests do exactly what they want. And as stated by a previous short-term rental owner in this meeting, we have absolutely no control of our guests. A short-term rental permit is a privilege allowing an exceptional change to the general plan and zoning. It greatly affects the community and permanent residents' day-to-day activities and safety. You cannot say only poorly managed or illegal short-term rentals are the problems. I had trespassing encroachment on my property from a group of guests staying in a short-term rental owned by a sitting town council member. Adherence to regulations will help keep community residents from voting to ban outright short-term rentals as other communities have done. Thank you.
Next, we have Paul Ivanushka, followed by Karen Post. Paul Ivanushka, I request you to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Paul Ivanushka. I'm assuming you can all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I'm a full-time resident of Yucca Valley. Myself and my family have been property owners here in Yucca Valley for about the last 50 years. And I currently own rental property here. First of all, I'd like to agree with 100% on everything that Ms. Strachan previously said. I do think that the 300 limit is minimum. The response times, I think, are totally appropriate. And again, managing property, a rental unit or a business is a full-time occupation. I think most of us, or many of us, have been in situations where, as a professional, we've had to be on call 24/7. So, put on some big boy pants, I guess. The fines, I think, are appropriate. Margaret said all of that. However, what I'd like to add is I think that the permits, I think that this is a revenue generating opportunity for the city, either in the form of short-term rentals should be taxed at a different rate. We should at a much higher rate. I think the permits are very inexpensive, and I think the prices on the permits should be raised. And let's look at this. If we got, and I'm against short-term rentals, period. Okay, I've had friends who've owned Airbnbs and short-term rentals, and I think what's happening to Yucca Valley is a disgrace. The crowds that are coming in. And I think that it's going to probably have to happen, okay? And I think from a civic standpoint, the town council, you as members, and the city planning commission, and we as citizens of Yucca Valley, we're going to have to live with this. It should be looked at as a revenue-generating situation so that we can cover the enforcement of the calls and the sheriff's going out to respond to noise and so forth. And, maybe we could take the revenue from these short-term rentals and get a movie theater going here. A real movie theater like we used to have. Anyway, that's it. Again, I think that we should not increase the number of short-term rentals that we have. And that's it. Thank you for hearing me out, and I thank the town council members and everybody here for the hard work and the comments so far to date. And I wish you all a good evening, and thank you for your time.
Next, we have Karen Post, followed by Rafael Khalshan. Karen Post, I have requested you to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Unmute. Okay, let's see. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. And thank you to the members of the town council and everybody who's put so much work into this. I'm very heartened to see that there will be an application process to the land use compliance review for those homes that qualify to increase the maximum occupancy. I have a 6-bedroom home and have been operating as a short-term vacation rental, which has allowed 14 people for a long time. We are not a party house. We've never had one noise complaint, and so I'm happy to see that. I'm curious, maybe someone could tell me what the factors will be that will be considered in granting an increase to the maximum occupancy. And will it be if you're on a lot of acres, or will it be if you have a lot of bedrooms? Will it be if you've never had a noise complaint before? So I'm curious about that and want to know where I can find out more about it and how to apply. And then I just wanted also another clarifying question, more than a comment. I do appreciate what people said opposing the 300-foot rule, and think every situation is different and there's a lot of complications to enforcing that rule. And I was wondering, from my reading of the changes to the ordinance, it seemed to me that if you if you already have your approved vacation rental permit, then you will be allowed to keep it, providing everything is in compliance, even if you are within 300 feet. So that was my read, and that was explained to me as well, and I'm wondering if someone from the council can clarify that. Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Rafael Khalshan. I have requested you to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you all so much. And I apologize, there's no camera on my computer, so I'm unable to turn it on for you. I'd like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to join this conversation. I'm incredibly impressed by the comments that have been made, the thoughtfulness of the committee up to this point, the thoughtfulness of the new proposed regulations, and the thoughtfulness of the comments that have preceded. I just want to offer some perspective from a family that would like to join this community. We've been coming to the area now for some time looking for a place for ourselves. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the prices of real estate in this area have skyrocketed, and the community has benefited enormously, I would imagine. And as a potential buyer, we've been looking for a house for over 6 months, and we have been priced out over and over and over again. So I know that people who are selling are benefiting from some of what's made the area such a hot market. So there is an element to consider for the council that there is, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you to some degree. Lots of folks are capitalizing on the opportunities that now exist as a result of a market that has been inflated because of short-term rentals, not exclusively, of course, but in large part because of short-term rentals. In addition, I just want to point out that the property we've fallen in love with was a property that we stayed in. It was an Airbnb. We stayed there. It was how we fell in love with Yucca Valley, actually, specifically. And it's now for sale, and we are in the process of trying to buy it, and we hope we can afford it. The plan is for us to move in there as a primary residence. However, because the prices are so high and because we own our own small business, we have to consider whether or not we'll be able to afford it on the long term. And if we need assistance to stay in the home, we'd like to be able to turn to short-term rental as an option. This property is currently owned by property managers exclusively. Nobody lives in that house. So the community would, by shutting out the opportunity for folks like us to apply or to be in line, or by changing the way in which you get in line, you lose the opportunity to have people like us join the community as bona fide residents. If we can't go into a process where we're converting a property that was previously exclusively a short-term rental and turn it into a home that maybe only sometimes is a short-term rental, you're losing an opportunity to have a family that would be a great addition to your community. So I want to put it on your radars that this is broader than just what you've got happening there today. This is a condition that's really dynamic. I think Monica pointed out also, and I know I'm running out of time, Monica pointed out some pitfalls about information that gets passed on. We actually were told by brokers that the rental permit would convert if we purchased the house. It's only because of our own diligence that we found out that was not the truth. Had we purchased the house and found out in that process that we didn't have that permit, that would have been a big problem. So to Monica's point, you're going to face all kinds of other nightmares. So I know I'm out of time. I thank you so much for letting me talk to you. This is super complex, and I appreciate all the thought and effort that's gone into it.
That is all for the online comments.
Okay, thank you, everybody that chimed in on that. We had a couple of people join us during the public comment. Does anybody else in the room, any member of the public wish to comment on this? Okay.
Mayor, I do have a comment from a local resident, Russell Gibbs, who could not stay to comment on his own. He is asking or stating that he's against the 300-foot rule and the cap at 10%. I believe we let the market dictate the amount. We are currently at 5% VRBOs, which is very low compared to Joshua Tree or Big Bear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have some input from staff before we come to council?
Mayor and council, just a few comments on the public comments this evening. In terms of the overall approach in this ordinance, is to put the responsibility of operations on the owner, not on the town. And that's where operational responsibility lies. Whether you're a commercial restaurant, a retailer, a hotel operator, or a short-term vacation rental operator, you are responsible for the operations. You are responsible for what occurs on that property. And the whole ordinance has originally structured in 2017 with that approach and continues with that approach today. Comments were made about reasonableness in review of the response time. So one example was given of the threat of violence, weapon violence, etc. Well, if that kind of complaint comes to town staff, we're going to say, you didn't respond in time, therefore we're fining you. No, we have to look at every circumstance and every individual case on its merits. From staff's perspective, for business operations in a residential neighborhood is 15 minutes enough time to make a text message or a phone call, or 30 minutes to be on site to resolve a situation a reasonable amount of time? From staff's perspective, that's a reasonable amount of time. Statement was made, we only allow for one individual person to be the responding party, and that is not correct. You can have a 35-page list of employees that are in your company that respond to your corporate sites. We review all of those for response time to an address when we are reviewing that application, and so there's absolutely not a limit to just one individual. Two individuals commented this evening on the consideration of single-family homes that are located in other zones. The code specifically, since 2017, has stated, and this is section 5.40.070, additional development standards, zoning districts. STVR shall only be allowed in RM, RS, RL, and RHA zoning districts as established on the Yucca Valley zoning map. So there were comments this evening about 7054 Dryden, an application that was received, rejected, an appeal that was received and rejected. All of those actions were appropriate and 100% compliant with the development code, as that address on Dryden Avenue is not in any of the authorized zones. But you've heard two public comments this evening about should a single family unit in other zones be allowed, and that's something the council may want to discuss this evening. Comments were made this evening about finding the guests. We've had that discussion internally, and no, we cannot find the guest, number one. Number two, as stated earlier, the owner's responsible for the activities of the guests. The owner has actions they can take up to and calling the police, evicting the residents from those guests. And I've had operators tell me they can actually find the guests themselves. So we would ask that you include that in your business operations plan and that you do take responsibility for those operational issues. Suggestion was made about the permit remaining valid upon the sale to another individual. Business registration is valid for the business operator. If that changes, you can go into any city. If that changes, you're mandated to have a new business registration or new business license. And this permit is issued to the individual. It is not issued to the property. So allowing a new individual with a new contact information, we have no ability to contact them. We have no ability to take enforcement action if we don't even know who they are. So I think it's a very standard approach in the town's ordinance that the permit is to the individual, the new individual applies for the permit. I think those are staff's only technical comments, Mayor and Council, that were made on the ordinance this evening. We'd be happy to answer any additional questions as the council walks through their policy discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification on all of those. Bringing it back to the council for comment, Mayor Pro Tem Dennison, would you like to lead it off?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So a lot of good comments and discussion tonight. Thank you for continuing to help us navigate through this and continue to have a good program within our community. You know, the one thing that I always look at is that it doesn't create disruption and it's sustainable. That's really what I'm looking at. And there's so many moving pieces on this right now that I don't know if we can actually, or I can actually try and figure out every single part of it. But what we've done is taken the biggest pieces and the ones that were reported as having the biggest disruption for our community. We're talking about 5% of the homes right now, and a lot of folks had made mention that if we disrupt this program, that 5% of the homes and the renters in those homes will disrupt our community. And it may, but I don't think it's devastating. Really what's causing it is a few neighborhoods are being disrupted by the activity of a few, 5%. We've looked at going up to 10% within the development code recommendations. But the biggest thing that we had in here that I like, and I've heard a lot of comments, positive and negative on them, are the controls that we put in place and the tools that we're going to use to manage those controls. And the controls are what you and the public have talked about, the council has spoken of before, and we heard it online also. And one of the things that we talked about was the change in occupancy numbers with some potential variances on certain size homes and the vehicles on site. And I agree with those recommendations that they have today because it does allow the operator or owner to make variations on those on exceptions. And I don't want to get in the weeds. I'm sure you've all read the proposed development codes. And another thing that really struck me on that is that we had 75% stated as compliance within the last 60 days to use another tool that we've discussed, which was sound monitoring equipment on the sites. Some folks have already been doing that proactively, and I think that's great. That was one of the largest complaints that we had. And so I think it's a good thing, a good tool for the owners and operators, for their guests, to have them remain in compliance and create a more stable environment within those communities without disruption. I am not in favor at all of fines with pass-through. I don't know how that would be managed. I don't know how you could push a fine onto one of your guests. That is just, it's not something we do in any other area, as staff has mentioned, within our community. If someone creates a business, we want those business owners to be responsible for what they do. And I know all of you here are very responsible. You're here. And most of the time, the people that have brought these good ideas forward are the ones that have probably some of the best cases of short-term vacation rentals for our community. So I'm not in favor of considering any kind of pass-through of fines to the guest. Moving it from the development code to the municipal code was something that took a lot of work. That's the reason today we're having public hearings on this, because it's in the development code and it requires this by law. Moving it as an administrative function into the municipal code will allow us to be more responsive on things that come up. We can certainly do that and change that code without as much process as we do changing the development code. And I think that's another great tool. The cap right now, I think, is a really good starting point at 10%. As these move into the municipal code, it's going to allow us to see how that needle moves and how it changes operations. But we have to start somewhere. We have to start with some kind of framework that we can start to move a little bit. We're biting off a lot right now to make changes, to put the controls in place and use these tools that I'm talking about now. And that's why I want to try and get some big pieces out of the way, and then we can start to look at others. One of them staff mentioned, I don't know if now's the time for it, but we will talk about it, is zoning of certain single-family residentials in different zoning areas that are listed outside of the current ordinance. Another one that was in there, and I'm not in favor of this one, and that would be duplex units considered as short-term vacation rentals, duplexes and fourplexes. I'll be interested to see the rest of the council and their comments on that, but I think that's a tough one to manage. It's kind of hard to get away from one sheet of drywall when we're considering and arguing over 300 feet of distance between short-term vacation rentals, and now we're talking a sheet of drywall. That seems like that's a little more disruptive. The response times are an excellent starting point for me. Good hosts will keep in contact with their guests. They'll have some way for them to get a hold of them. That's part of, I think, what the guest wants to have too. They would like to have a host that is responsive and able to make sure that they have a good experience at that home. They don't want the calls not returned. They're looking for responsiveness, and I would like to see responsiveness to help us get over the disruption that has been reported to the town. The fines are a good starting point, and as I said, I'm against the pass-through. Let's see, what else do I have in here? So now onto I kind of beat around this one a little bit. So the density rule that they talk about 300 feet. There were a few good comments in there that talked about exactly how would you measure it? Where would the measurement point come from? Would it be from the property, from the structure? What if there's multiple structures on it, and what if you decide to change one to the other over time? How does all that work? What if we're looking at more dense areas, say like Paradise Valley, what I call the Indian and Animal Streets, you know, the old part of town where homes are very close and high density? 300 feet would be a good portion of the block. When we look at larger properties, Western Hills, those kinds of areas, Upper Sky Harbor, the lots are very large, well in excess of 300 feet. So today, for me, I think our first step in density management is a cap and occupancies on the property, and the cap being at 10%. And the occupancy limit being, as we've seen today in the tables, I'm in total agreement. I actually was originally looking at tightening that up a little bit, but I think with the other controls in place, we have good tools to help manage that and be realistic about it, that those are the things, those are the limits. You know what the violations can impose, so we're all on the same page. And when we talk about, what was it, density? Yeah, I guess that's it about density. So I'm not in favor of the 300-foot rule in myself. That was probably the biggest one that I heard tonight, with agreement and disagreement. But that's my position on it. But I am very committed to ensuring that most of these controls in place that identify bad behavior, that they are enforced. And all of you, and I like hearing your comments. It's important. You're here because you're passionate. It is a business enterprise in a residential area, and we need to make sure that we don't impact and disrupt those communities with this business enterprise that we're doing. So that's my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lombardo.
Want to thank everybody for making comments and coming out and being online. It really helps us understand the problem better when we hear from you. It is a complex problem. I have rented short-term vacation rentals in Santa Barbara when my daughter was in college there, and they had a fee that it wasn't a fee that they charged, but it was like they put a hold on your credit card for $1,500, $2,000, because if you violated the rules there was very steep fines in the town of Santa Barbara. And so that is kind of, I saw, was like the owner's insurance that the guest would not misbehave, because at that time $1,000 was a lot of money and $1,500 was outrageous. So we were very careful not to violate the noise regulations or the parking on the street violation and those kind of things. I like the idea of having fines that are substantial and that are a little bit threatening, because we don't want you to violate the rules. It makes it more trouble when we have to go out and make sure that you're complying with this. And I think a monetary violation fine that is in that range is very appropriate and will make people think twice about making too much noise or leaving the trash cans out and having them fall over and spread out throughout the neighborhood, which has been a complaint of a couple of people that I've talked with. And I think something that Councilman Dennison discussed was that this is a good starting point, and by moving it to the municipal code, we'll have more ability to refine it in a more timely manner because of the public notification and the hearings and all that. It takes a longer period of time to get from the Planning Commission to the council to make approvals or changes to things. And kind of like what happened with the moratorium on permits. It was kind of spread out longer than I thought it should have been. Let's see. Let me ask the staff, any violation of our rules for short-term rentals goes from 1,500 to the, what was it, 2,500s or 3,000, 3,500? I'm sorry, there was a definite step, and that's for any violation. That's noise, that's shooting off fireworks. I mean, that's not permitted in our town, right?
So that starts to get into fire department regulations, and no, county fire.
Okay.
Fireworks are prohibited. So section 5.40.140, verified, critical term, short-term vacation rental permit operational violations. So for staff to be able to issue a citation, we need to have documentation. We need to be able to document and verify and document what occurred. I think you described it very well. Town staff does not want to have to do that. These are here as a tool. This is part of the tool bag for when we run into an operator that is causing issues or problems, and we have had one. I held 3 directors' hearings based upon complaints filed on 3 separate short-term vacation rentals. 2 were not substantiated. A 3rd was substantiated, and in that particular case, the individual was just not suited to be an operator, and from what I've been told, he has since sold the property and no longer operating an STVR in Yucca Valley. In that particular case, we were very close to starting the citation process under existing regulations, not under this fee structure. But we go through a process of working with that operator, giving them the opportunity. Please, you need to address this issue. These are the important issues in our community. Quiet, no noise, lighting, trespassing, which was one of the major complaints occurring on this particular site. We go down through those criteria. So again, we take a common sense approach to these operational issues. We require documentation. And we're going to work with the business community, just like we do with the commercial business community, to ensure they fit into the neighborhood. These tools are available if we need to use them.
Great. So I'm very much in favor then of the fine structure. I like the idea of moving it to the municipal code from the building code. And I think the other, we had a little, couple people commented on residential properties that were in other than residential zones. That's something that probably needs to be addressed, but if we can handle that at a different time. I don't think that's a pressing problem right now. We need to get it into the municipal code where we can take care of things a little easier. And I think that this is a good start. So I definitely think that we should move forward with what's.
Well, we're not ready for that yet, but
yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
I
Mayor
think-
Pro Tem, you had another comment?
Yeah, just one more thing I wanted to mention. I'm more than happy to move forward on a lot of these things that we talked about that weren't exactly on what the Planning Commission had worked on. So we're going to include that. So I don't think it's being excluded in any way. There was one other thing too, though, the hard work of good hosts and those that represent them. They do a good job. They're not the ones that are causing the problem. I remember a comment at one of our earlier meetings. A gentleman that lived over on the old part of town, I believe it was on Hopi or Inca, somewhere around there. He found out, he met someone in his neighborhood that was a short-term vacation rental. He never knew it, and he'd lived there for years. And that's the kind of place, it's people that want to immerse themselves into the same reason we're all here. It's just a beautiful place. And that was and I brought that up because one of the comments earlier was to pass the permit to the new buyer, even if it's for a limited time or the owner. And I don't know if that's a good idea. I think the hard work that all these hosts do represents that host, and that host has something of value in this community that would be able to be passed on and used as some kind of reference point for possibly another vacation rental or some other kind of activity within the town, regardless of what it is. So I wouldn't want to tarnish that by passing this on from one to the other, so that would be an item I would not consider.
I want to comment on that for one second, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
As a business owner in town, I just recently sold a portion of my dental practice. The buyer of my practice had to get a business permit, but it couldn't. Can the town reasonably refuse it if there's no violation that's occurred? I would kind of like to see it be able to be move forward, unless there's a reason to deny it. But how do you,
So-
I don't know how you'd monitor that, but
So
STV is different than a business practice, a dental practice.
couple things, if we may, and the town attorney may want to comment on a portion. So as the Mayor Pro Tem was talking about changes or portions of the recommended action that's before you this evening being supported or not supported, you brought up a couple issues. You brought up the issue of not supporting duplexes and also not supporting the 300-foot density issue. So for changes this evening, it's my understanding there has to be, all three council members have to be unanimous in those modifications. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I think it's important as the council is walking through these policy deliberations this evening to make sure that you address the issues as you are working together with each other. So maybe we could go back to Councilmember Lombardo for just a moment on the duplex and density issue. So Dennison has, in my words, has requested removal of duplexes and the 300-foot density standard. I don't know if you would like
I can go along with those, with removing them, yes.
Okay, very good. Now, in terms of your question on process, so any application that comes into the town, we process according to the regulations that are in place.
Okay.
And so what this says is within 14 days of a change of owner's agent or representative or any other change in material fact pertaining to the information contained in the application, the owner or the owner's authorized agent or representative shall submit an application. So they have 14 days from that change in the case that Monica brought up, change of ownership. They have 14 days to file that new application with us, and we would process that application as just like any other application.
Okay.
And so,
What's the processing time for an application nowadays? Oh, sorry.
there are applications that have, and I don't have a precise number for you, but there are applications that have been filed in 2022. So that's approximately 30 working days that I was approving today.
Okay.
So it's occurring in what we would consider a relatively adequate amount of time. Now, just want to go one step further. In terms of the overall ordinance, the only issue that, as currently drafted, potentially affects being able to approve that transfer, that new application that's transferring under ownership, is the density limit. And so this evening, 2 of the 3 council members have already identified the desire to remove that density limit. If that density limit is removed, then there's really no other restriction. As long as they comply with all provisions of the code, we'd be issuing that new permit.
Okay.
And I would anticipate, since they've been operating under current regulations, that's not an issue.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. So
All right, my turn.
Send.
First of all, the whole STVR issue is not unique to Yucca Valley. It's happening all over the country, and we are kind of watching what's happening elsewhere as we review our ordinance and refine it as we go. So it's not unique. Also, I'd like to say that given the amount of occupancy nights in our STVRs in Yucca Valley, the number of complaints and bad actors are relatively few. It's not a wholesale crisis that we've been out to address here. It's sharpening up our ordinance, trying to see what we can do about tightening up enforcement and moving to the next step. We don't know what the future of the short-term vacation rental market is going to be. It could continue the way it's been going, or it could level off, or it could decline in a short time. We just don't know that. So we expect to be revisiting these kinds of issues in the future. So what we put in place tonight is our best guesses based on the facts that we know. Going down the list, from moving this item from the development code to the municipal code, for the reasons mentioned by everybody, is in my mind, a very positive move. I'm in favor of that. It will enable us to address tweaks without going through a big, long process. We will be able to do that very efficiently. I really like the language that's added in there for the land use compliance review for those properties that are more than 3 bedrooms. If people want to, if operators want to apply for increased capacity limits, this language in there provides for that, and I think that's a positive step. There are several properties that I know of that are getting designed differently. They're getting designed with 6 and 7 bedrooms, smaller bedrooms, more common area, and I think it's important to make sure we accommodate those. Noise monitoring software and equipment, good idea. I'm not sure I love that it's mandatory, but I would assume that the intent is for existing operators that this would be upon renewal, that this would become mandatory for them if the way it's written.
Well, there may be 2 answers to that at the functional level and what exactly the code says. So as we've been permitting over the last 90 days, we have been making the installation of the equipment a condition of approval. And as we've discussed it with the permittees, we've indicated to them, please get this installed in the next 60, 90, 120 days. Provide us proof of that. We put that in the file and we're great. Is there any staff time to go out and be checking if existing operators have this equipment? That staff time does not exist. That's not in our work program. We're not going to be doing that. At a functional level, we'll be reviewing that at the time of renewal.
Okay. Regarding the cap, the 10% cap of the housing inventory, I'm fine with that. I think that's one of those things that's yet to be seen. If we hit a saturation point between now and that 10%, there might be a saturation point, there might not, but we will learn that as we go, that it could become no longer profitable for some operators if there are too many STVRs. So that could resolve the problem without us having to do anything else. So I'm good with the 10% cap, and the wait list past that. We'll see how that goes. Is there something if during that, as we count? Now, that's a count that we do annually. Okay, it's an annual count. And that would also take into consideration those properties that reverted to single-family residence with a family moving in. Would we be able to track that if they just abandoned their permit and moved the family in? Would we have any way of knowing that when we're counting our 10%?
It's difficult because a lot of times they don't report that they're ceasing their operations. And that's why if somebody asked today, what's the actual number of permitted unit or operating units, we wouldn't be able to tell you exactly because we're permitting some on a daily basis. Other people are dropping out of the market on a daily basis. So it is a pretty difficult issue to track.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Regarding density, the 300-foot rule, I appreciate all the work that went into that and the Planning Commission tossing that back and forth. But given the configuration of our community, the different neighborhoods, the different sized lots, the different units on these lots, I just think the density issue needs a lot more study. And I am happy to go down that road, but I just don't think we're ready to impose a density rule at this time with this. Owner-occupied units, I'm not sure, especially with no density rule, if we need to treat them any differently. Right. From what I'm hearing about being there half a year, being there most of the year. And we're assuming these are really diligent people that are going to be there, but they're only there half a year under this. So why would we treat them differently? I just don't see. I would be happy with just striking that and treating them all the same. The fines, I agree with the proposal for the reasons that have been mentioned. And without a pass-through, I think it is up to the owner-operators to be responsible for the property and not for the town to be trying to track down people that were here for a weekend and finding them. So it just doesn't sound practical at all. Okay, on the definition of short-term vacation rental, it did say single-family residences and duplexes, and I have, every time I've thought about that and read that, and I've driven through town and looked at duplexes and tried to see how that would be practical. A lot of them are shared walls or shared carports, and it feels like in a duplex, if you're in the front unit and you've got people coming in and out with who knows how many cars, maybe your kids play out there. You know, I don't know. It just seems like not the best thing to have duplexes as part of the short-term vacation rental option. And if we do have any that are currently permitted, I'd be fine with grandfathering them in, but I'm fine with eliminating that language. The nuisance response plan, I like that. I just kind of wonder if the town can provide a template for that, because it sounds like that's going to be something that's going to look a whole lot like everybody else's, but with some tweaks for the property. So if we could provide a template, I think that would help out our operators. On the capacities, I think that's fine, what I saw, especially with the flexibility for the larger units. I've run into this in a few neighborhoods where I've seen cars come out onto the street, parked on the street, because the driveway area is just not big enough to handle the 3 or 4 cars even. And it says the cars must be parked on the property, so that means they would be parking on non-driveway area, and that might not be ideal. So especially like day guests in a 3-bedroom, that could go up to 6 cars. And then they're either parking on the street or they're parking on somewhere else on the property. So I think as we review the application and give the permit, if there's something in there that could designate the number of parking spaces that are available, reasonably available, or whoever's assigned to approve the permit or review the application could check into that and see. I could see that being a problem. With regard to the response time, I think I agree with the comments that from the time of the complaint to the time of response is extremely short, but I do understand that staff is not heavy-handed about enforcement there. If the owner-operator is responding as quickly as is reasonable and taking care of the problem, I think that's the spirit of the law, and I think that's important to note. Change of ownership, I think that probably should stay the way that it's written, that it would not transfer to the new owner for a lot of reasons. I could see problems occurring if it was just running with the property. So let's see, what else do I have here? The zoning issue for applications that are not zoned appropriately for a short-term vacation rental. I believe I heard staff say that could be something that council considers in the future to address that. I think there's relatively few of those, but I think the case that was made this evening sounded pretty reasonable, and I think we should take a look at that. Also, a couple more here. We talked about duplexes, but apartments are not a single-family resident, but what about the common interest developments, the condos? There's a few condo complexes in town, and full disclosure, I own one and live in one, and several of my neighbors there have asked what happens to them. Now, they're also sharing walls and sharing carports and concerned about their common area, but I don't see condos or common interest developments, or whatever it's called these days. I don't see that addressed in the ordinance, and I would like to. It seems like, along with the same thinking along the lines as duplexes, it doesn't sound like that's a good formula for allowing short-term vacation rentals in there. So if we could amend that language and include condos. And again, I don't know of any that are already permitted in any of the condo complexes, but it's there. I'd like to get some staff feedback on that idea. And I think that covers my comments. I'd like to ask the other council members at this point if they have any additional comments before we get upset.
One other comment on the number of vehicles and I guess actually the number of persons. Are we counting children as full adults in a residence then? And then the other thing would be on vehicles. What if somebody brings a trailer and has 3 motorcycles on it because they plan to go riding out in the desert? do those count as vehicles on the property?
So on your first question, in definitions, occupant is defined as any individual 2 years in age or older
Okay.
that occupied or intends to occupy a short-term vacation rental unit overnight. So that's the definition.
All right, thank you. And as far as vehicles, if somebody brings a truck with a trailer and 3 motorcycles, is that 5 vehicles? Or?
That's 27 feet. No, I'm kidding. We would be looking at it as one vehicle. We're not going to count the units that are up on the trailer, the motorcycles or the quads or any of those types of things as additional vehicles. We're going to count that as one vehicle.
ATVs, okay, thank you.
Yeah, one question for staff. I just wanted to make sure, I'm pretty sure it is, but that our noise ordinance is in alignment with the hours shown here between 10 and 7 as a general rule for
Yes,
our
sir.
community. Okay, thank you.
Do we have we have a night ordinance for lights, right? How do we enforce that?
So the town has an adopted outdoor lighting ordinance. It has standards set forth in the ordinance. One of the and ours is a very basic ordinance. We don't get into lumens and brightness and those types of things. So we've matched the standard in the outdoor lighting regulations with here, which is fully shielded, and the lighting not trespassing onto somebody else's property. And there's a definition of trespass and how you measure trespass, and you have to do that on a moonless night with a yardstick at property line to see if the lighting is casting a shadow on somebody else's property. So that same standard is applicable in both the standard lighting regulations as well as the STVR regulations.
And this is looked at the time of giving a permit, or?
Yes,
explained?
yes, it is. That's correct.
Great.
Okay, does staff have clarity on the council's intention?
Yes, sir. So just to walk through what staff has heard this evening from the council, number one, the 300-foot density standard is being removed, and I just want to read into the record specifically. That is currently identified as section 5.40.100. That would be removed from the code. Because that is removed from the code, the question was raised as to, is there really any value left in retaining the owner-occupied short-term vacation rental site standards? I think staff agrees with the council's suggestion that that has little value remaining, and therefore, section 5.40.110, owner-occupied short-term vacation rental site, would be eliminated from the code. The council then requested removal of duplex. Duplex is identified in the definition of short-term vacation rental. It is also identified in the definition of short-term vacation rental unit, and it is also mentioned in section 5.40.100, short-term vacation rental unit density. So in all of those sections, the reference to duplex as well as would be removed. Also, the council at least has suggested that there be language added into the appropriate sections in the code that STVR permits are essentially for detached single-family residential units, not for attached single-family, which would imply condominium, and also not for duplex structures. So that language would be added into the code. And I believe that identifies the changes that the council has requested to be made this evening, that the town clerk would modify and would be included for second reading at your next meeting. And then finally, the town council asked at a future date if staff would return with a discussion of single-family residential units located in other zoning districts as a possible amendment to the code.
Two quick points of clarification. Also, the owner occupied short-term vacation rental site is in the definition section as well, so we would delete that from the definition section. And Mayor, you mentioned potentially grandfathering in duplex units that currently have permits. If that's the will of the council, I could read into the record how that language would read in the ordinance.
Do we currently have any?
I believe we have at least one that has been issued.
I would agree with retaining that permit.
Yeah, I agree too.
And then move forward with the new policy.
So if you'll allow me just to read in, we would add a section to section 3 of the ordinance. It will become, it will go underneath section 3 of the ordinance, and it will read as follows. Upon the effective date of this ordinance, duplex units that are the subject of an existing short-term vacation rental permit shall be considered legal nonconforming units and may continue to operate as short-term vacation rental units and may continue to apply for and receive permit renewals in accordance with Chapter 5.40 until the permit expires or is terminated, or until there is a change of ownership in the duplex unit.
Okay.
That concludes the changes
Thank you.
that I have.
Thank you for that. Does council feel like that represents what
Our
we
agreement, yep.
have?
It has to be all three of us.
Right.
Yes,
So-
those were my big pieces.
Yeah,
that we
mine
covered
too.
tonight.
So given that, and with those changes, those adjustments that we just heard, I would entertain a motion to introduce, we're introducing the ordinance. Is that what we're doing?
I'll move, we introduce the ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion
And I'll second.
and a second.
Councilmembers Abel is not here. Councilmember Dennison,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
and Mayor Schooler.
Yes. Well, thank you, everybody, for all the work on that. I'm sure we'll be talking about it again, but for now, I think that's a lot of progress. So thanks, and thank you, everybody that came and gave comments on that.
Real quick before they run off, one other thing, please keep in touch with those that had further suggestions. You can talk to your council at any time.
Okay, moving on to future agenda items. I don't know if the other council members have left for the evening, but is Councilmember Droz online with us?
Shows them online.
He is?
Yes, I
Okay,
am.
good.
And I have no future items.
No future agenda item. Anybody else?
No, I think I'm busy.
I do. I have one. I'd like to see if we could get a summary or a review of our public art program, see what we're doing. I think a question came up with regard to what can we do with the pedestal that the Christmas tree was on, and the suggestion was, well, maybe we put a sculpture out there, and then how do we acquire that sculpture? And so it seemed appropriate that maybe we review that public art acquisition, how we acquire, how we care for, and display public art in our town.
Mayor, you currently
11
have
months a
that
year.
direction. The council provided that direction to staff. Previously, I think that is on the agenda for the planning, or for the PRCC Commission at their March meeting, scheduled March meeting. I would expect after that discussion, there should be a recommendation or an update or both to the town council shortly thereafter.
Oh, great, thank you. Okay, we move on to public comments. The town council takes this time to consider your comments on items of concern which are not on the printed agenda. When you are called to speak, please state your name and community of residence. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Inappropriate behavior which disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting will result in forfeiture of your public comment privileges. The town council is prohibited by state law from taking action or discussing items not on the printed agenda. Do we have anybody with us here in the room, remaining in the room, that would like to make a comment? You're welcome to. Come on up.
I don't know if it's appropriate. I'd like to see new sidewalks in the Old Town District. There's cracks, there's trip zones, there's big areas of just dirt, and that's where most of walking happens in town.
Okay,
that's all.
thank you. And is there anybody online, members of the public, that would like to comment?
We have one person online requesting public comment. Margaret Strachan, I've requested you to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Unmute. I have a quick, it's not letting me unmute.
You're unmuted.
You're unmuted.
We can hear you.
Okay. I have a quick question regarding the city trails or the town of Yucca Valley trails. I have a trail through my property, a trail easement, and my concern is there's a lot of small Joshua trees on that easement. What is my responsibility if native plants or Joshua trees are damaged during trail use?
Well, we are not permitted to respond to items not on the printed agenda, but you can contact our Community Development Department. They can give you information on that. I believe the number is 760-369-6575? 6575.
Yes, sir.
760-369.
6575.
Yeah, I just got to thinking about it because after the last planning meeting, when the gentleman was possibly facing fines for damaging Joshua trees on his property, trees that had been damaged by a contractor. So I just would like to look into that. I'd like the council to keep something like this in mind as far as liability on these easements. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Any others? Okay, we move on to staff reports and comments.
Council, you had quite a bit of input, so we'll keep these short. Anyone have comments this evening? All right.
Just Planning Commission meeting next Tuesday will be a public hearing on the town's updated housing, safety, and conservation elements. And then assuming Planning Commission recommends to the town council approval, that would be coming before the town council at your second meeting in March.
Mayor, just thank you to the council and the community for working through the short-term vacation rental. I believe the mayor indicated that this is likely going to be something that comes back to you occasionally throughout the implementation of this activity, as many other communities have. But it's been a little bit of a journey from the fall, going through the moratorium and then allowing staff to work through some of these changes and the input that we receive from the community. So thank you for that.
Okay, bringing it back for council member reports and comments. Councilmember Droz?
I have no comment tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Lombardo?
Real brief. Thanks, everyone, for your comments. Awesome work from the staff to get this all together. It seems like we made some progress. I feel good about where we're heading, and thank you for your attention and your concern for your community. That's it.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem? Oh, your 3 minutes are
My
up.
3 minutes are up. Yeah.
Wow, that was quick.
Thank you, Leslie. So I got out of that easy. I have nothing to comment on tonight. I just want to thank the community again. This was a lot of work for everybody involved, and that included the community. I know a lot of emotions started out, and I think we're at a spot now where we can continue to make improvements over time and make it right for the community. Thanks.
Let me just say, welcome to our new employee at the Senior Center, Sharma, is it? And congratulations, or well, he's retiring, leaving. We're sad to see Rick leave, but good luck and safe travels.
Okay, and I would also like to welcome the new staff member at the Senior Center who, I will find out your name, your mask was on and I couldn't really figure it out, so. Okay, welcome. And also, good luck and best wishes to Rick Shigley, and thank you for your 10 years with the town. Also, I had an opportunity to participate in the Miss Yucca Valley pageant over the weekend, and so I would like to congratulate our new Miss Yucca Valley, Leilani Electi, and her court, Lila Foster and Jaylene Ramos. And I assume we will be seeing them at one of our meetings here shortly to introduce themselves. And thank you to the Rotary Club, and particularly John Bobrowski, who ushers that program through every year and maintains that tradition in town. We had a pretty good turnout at our Coffee with the Mayor this morning, and that's on the first and third Tuesdays of every month over at the Roost Cafe at the golf course. And we had a good turnout, good discussion, and everybody is welcome to join us there. And no particular agenda, but bring whatever issues you want to know more about, or learn more about our projects and programs and things that are coming up with the town. So everybody's welcome to join that. It's 8 o'clock on the first and third Tuesdays. So with that, we will move on to any announcements. Are there any announcements? None at this end. Our next meeting of the Yucca Valley Town Council will be on March 1st, 2022 at 6 p.m. in the Yucca Valley Community Center Yucca Room. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.